she deliberately obscures. And then Alice, it's going to hurt my feelings. But Julie says, okay, I'll ask him, and she checks with Oscar, can I please tell her she's my best friend? So very interesting how she's negotiating a different relationship with Alice on the basis of having an ally in Oscar. And Alice is not too sure about this. Is she gonna buy into this relationship? And Alice says, I know what he said. But Julie perseveres and said, should I tell her? And then Alice gives in and says, I won't tell no one. And Julie, as if quoting, says, he's my friend and he likes me and he likes you. So fascinating the way that she's using language now in conversations to, in a sense, build up a relationship of power in relation to her and Alice, but using their allies, using Oscar then as an ally to gain cultural capital, as Bourdieu would argue. But interestingly enough, when Sujit comes by, Alice, whispering to Oscar, says, I'm making something for Santa. And Sujit says, I heard that. And Alice, what did I say? You're making something for Santa. No, I'm not. Sujit says, you're lying. No, I'm not. 10 seconds pass. And then Julie says, tell me what you said. And Alice then whispers her secret to Julie, and Sujit walks away. So very interesting to see, who gets included into conversations, who gets excluded from conversations. You can certainly see Sujit going home and saying to her mom, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. And the mom says, why, what's the problem? No, I don't like school, I've got a sore stomach, right? So in fact, as it turned out, Sujit, in fact, was positioned as an unsuccessful language learner. And yet you can see very clearly her attempts to enter into conversations, but in fact being excluded from that possibility. So people might argue that in fact Sujit was not motivated to learn English. And I've talked in my own work about the notion of investment as being a complementary way of understanding notions of motivation. So what is Sujit's motivation to learn English? Well, you see, it's part of a paradigm that sees motivation as a character trait, and learner personality as central, and language as a system. But I would ask, what is Sujit's investment in the language practices of her classroom? So I would argue that although she was a highly motivated learner, she was not invested in the language practices of that classroom. It connects clearly with issues of identity and language as a social practice. So I've argued that, while motivation assumes a unitary and coherent and ahistorical language learner, investments assumes a complex identity, changing across time and space and reproduced in social interaction. So if we have a look here at another study, now we look here, I'm going now at the middle school study here, we look at popular culture, and in fact I think Mary McGrathy yesterday was saying we need to bring the arts a little bit more into the classroom. And I've also been looking at popular culture and comic books, for example, as a way of bringing kids together. And as you see here, but one of my grad students talking to a student, where did you come to Canada 2 years ago? Do you speak English in Korea? No. What has helped you to learn English? Reading comics. Seriously? Yeah? I read a comic every day. I read Calvin and Hobbes and Archie's and adventure things. So we look at Dyson, who says that curriculum must also be undergirded by a belief that meaning is found not in the artifacts themselves, but in the social events through which those artifacts are produced and used. So again, we're looking then at the peer networks. Do they read Archie comics? This is the interviewer. Yes. We go to this. Do they, your friends, read Archie comics? Yeah. We go to each other's houses, like after school, and then we sometimes talk about characters, about their personality and stuff. So how did you get to read Archie comics? Who introduced you to Archie comics? My friend. So very interesting here, we see these peer networks and how kids are negotiating and entering into diverse relationships through the use of popular culture. So quite interesting, yesterday we talked a bit about, somebody raised a really interesting question about why should a native speaker support the interests of non-native speakers? Why give up your position of power? Was the question that was raised. And quite interesting, Dylan, little 9-10-year-old boy, maybe a little older, maybe 11-year-old. So Karen asked, is popular culture like Archie a good way of bringing kids together? So this is ESL and native speakers. Listen to what Dylan has to say. Well, yeah, because I know that one reason most of the kids with English problems and kids with good English don't relate is because the English kids seem to think that either they are stupid because they can't speak English, which is totally a misconception, or they're not like them and they're kind of pushed away by that. So that's what you think it's a good way because they can talk to each other? Because it would give them something to realize that these kids like some things that they like, that they are kids who like things that other kids like, which is a way of bringing them together. So where is the commonality? Where is the bond? How can we give, in a sense, a common language for kids? You know, sometimes schools have buddy systems, right? But you know, the buddy system lasts only as long as break, right? Break time. But if kids have a common bond between them, then in fact, that's how you build those relationships. And yet, interestingly enough, you know, parents sometimes just don't get the picture. So Ping says, my mom just doesn't want me to read comics anymore. So why do you think your mom doesn't like you to read comics? She says, like, I'm wasting my time. Like, I could do something better. Like, instead of reading comics, like actually doing homework. Now, do you think your teachers think the same way about comic books? Usually they do, because they want you to focus on your homework. So it's so interesting, you know, the rituals of schooling, you know, got to do your homework, but these kids are going to each other's houses, they're speaking the language, they talk about personalities of characters, but this is not something that is valued within the school context. And yet it is absolutely central to kids learning and building relationships with their peers. And if we look at this is my more recent work that I'm doing actually in the Ugandan context. And I'm looking here, part of what we're looking at is the role of the digital in promoting language learning and teaching. So just looking here, I'm actually doing some working mainly in Uganda and East Africa. And we're working in many of the rural areas of Uganda. So just to show you that one of the things that we've done is, remember I was talking about how do you offer learners a different identity position from which to speak. And so one of the things we're experimenting with is the digital camera. So if you actually give kids, this is in the Ugandan context, the camera, you know, what does that do to their relationships